Hello, BookTube. Well, as you can see, I have another guest. This is Micah Cummins, and we are engaged
Hello,
once again
hello.
in the Micah dialogues, where Micah and I are just two 20-something guys trying to figure out this topsy-turvy world where we are.
Yeah,
And how are you on this bright, sunny Sunday morning, Micah?
doing well. Enjoying. It's a little bit colder today.
Just a
We've had a
tiny bit.
warm front the last week, high 70s. Not my ideal fall winter today. It's like high 50s, so I'm feeling better.
Now, is your neck of the woods the northeastern seacoast is slated to get a big storm on the day before Thanksgiving, the highest volume travel day in all of America.
Yes.
Is supposed to be this big storm. Is your neck of the woods getting that as well?
I think we are. I don't know how bad it's going to be. It's not going to directly affect us because we're not traveling. We're staying where we are.
No,
Um
there is no weather event that can actually affect me in my travels from the little book room to the
no.
family. that's,
No. It would
that's
have to be pretty
all.
severe.
It would have to be pretty severe.
Blow your house in half.
But a whole bunch of the country. I mean,
Yeah.
a huge percentage of the country, and of course, anybody who's anybody lives on the northeastern side of the country, and they were all going to have to deal with this.
Only real people live on the on this side of the country.
Well, I guess if there was a storm in the western half of the country, it would interfere with your ability to shoot varmints. But we don't do that on this end of the country. So I worry, though.
Okay.
I worry about all the people I know who are traveling on Wednesday. Who knows
Yeah.
how many flights are going to be canceled or anything like that?
Yeah. It'll be a nightmare for anyone trying to coordinate flights and air, airport travel is already ridiculously annoying even when conditions are good.
Fortunately, the storm that's coming here only gets worse and worse the more losers it's dealing with. So it's rain in
Interesting.
Boston, it's sleet in Vermont, and it's snow in Maine, where who wouldn't care? You wouldn't care if it was cannonballs in Maine.
it, the storm goes off of the caliber of the inhabitants of the area.
So it's a bright, sunny Sunday, and
Yes.
Micah is fresh faced and he's wearing a cardigan. But I promised him off camera that I would throw him a curveball. And
I'm ready.
and this is it, where I ripped the surface off the sunny, presentable top layer of Micah and revealed a scandal underneath.
Interesting.
I'm going to reveal a secret that BookTube doesn't know, which is that underneath that bright, sunny exterior, Micah is currently leading along two different women in his reading life. And they don't know about each other, do they?
They
No,
do not.
either one of them would be
Two
very angry. And
rival
both of
monarchies.
them command million people armies. It's not a good idea to get either one of them angry.
No.
Care to confess, Micah, now that I've spilled your dirty secret?
The joint relationship between Queen Victoria and Catherine the Great, the two opposing forces in my reading life.
And they don't know. Neither one of them knows that they're not your only gal.
They don't know. I treat them like they are.
He's like a player from the hood.
Yeah,
He goes,
really. That's a
he goes
great.
to the Hermitage on alternate days and says, "You're the best, sweetie."
It's a great way to describe me.
Then he goes to Frogmore and says, "You're the best, sweetie."
I just bounce between. Travel time gets a little annoying. It's quite a trek from
but,
the Windsor Palace to Balmoral.
but it does touch on an interesting subject. The fact that you're stringing along both Queen Victoria and Catherine the Great and can't decide between the two of them. That does touch on an interesting subject, which is you are finding this, in other words, what I've found a lot of people, I've advocated this over the years, that it is a really good way to get into history, to find a person, or in
Yeah,
your case, two people,
two people.
and concentrate on them for a while,
Yeah,
especially if they're a kind of divining rod of their era, which
I find it really interesting. It's my preferred way to study an era as a whole, just to focus on one individual and just read everything you can.
And you're when it comes to Queen Victoria, I don't remember if you've done this for Catherine the Great, but when it comes to Queen Victoria, you're also starting to dabble into a really, what I think is, of course I would, but a really interesting way of reading, which is to read multiple biographies of one person and
Yes.
get a sense for all that's out there. It also gives you an incredible sense of the biographer's art. That's the
Right.
only way you're ever going to see it, is if you
Right.
see two biographers do the same person.
Exactly. And I like doing modern biographies as well as the contemporary biographies that would have come out. So then you have the difference of the writing of a figure who was currently monarch versus looking back in it as history, to get that different sense of how the story is presented or how information is presented. But then yes, just having the ability to stack 4, 5, 6 different biographies against each other, comparison and contrast between the differences. Obviously, if you see a major discrepancy, there's an issue. You don't want to see some giant difference in fact or a narrative that's going to raise a couple of red flags immediately, and that's happened before. And you're like, where do they get this random anecdote I've never heard before?
But that adds to the fun of it, I think, because
Absolutely.
it gets you to the essential question, which is, how do you know any of this?
Right.
How do you know that? When you
How
say so and so was short tempered, why are you saying that?
exactly.
I think
Exactly.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. It is separate from the reading experience. I,
I
I
agree.
don't know if you would. A lot of young people tend not to agree with me when I say that. You could say, you could read a history of Queen Victoria, let's say, that doesn't have any answer to that first question. You ask them, how do you know that? The writer will ultimately say, I don't know that. But didn't it make a good story? It's still listed under history. It's still in the nonfiction section of the bookstore. And
Right.
yet,
But it's sort of built on a claim that has no historical, or a claim that then is not given any historical backing within the book. Of
it,
you have a biographer, a historian by trade, basing their entire book off of a claim that they don't back up historically for you.
and yet sometimes those books are really enjoyable. Even so,
Absolutely.
I think this all comes down to the ancient Greeks. Everything comes down to the ancient Greeks, Mike.
It all comes back to
Your,
Greece.
your cardigan. They would not have understood that. They did not have anything like that. So
No,
they wouldn't have understood. I don't think the ancient Greeks would have understood you, Micah. I think you.
I don't think they would have.
But
Very few people understand me, Steve.
but but it comes down to Herodotus and Thucydides. Thucydides wanted to write about an event. He took part in it, and he talked to a whole bunch of people who took part in it, compared their accounts, and tried to square it into a narrative that didn't contradict anybody and that was aligned with the facts. Herodotus had a story to tell, and boy, oh boy, did he tell that story. And there's a guy right down the street who's the son of someone who took part in the end part of your story. Maybe you should go and interview him. Oh, he's all the way at the end of the street. I don't think so.
Too far.
I don't think so. Either I can go all the way to the end of the street and interview the son of a guy who participated in one of the events I'm writing about, or I can write about it raining toads. And
Right.
they are the two founders of history. It's just
Right.
went on from there.
The opposite approaches. I'll just fill in the details. I don't
So,
need to go talk to people.
so are you getting to the point where or have you, maybe you've already reached the point where the charm of a biographer means a lot, regardless of. I
I
mean,
think so.
you're reading Lytton Strachey's book on Queen Victoria, right? That's a perfect
Yes.
example.
I would, yeah, I would agree with that. I think once you've read a certain number of biographies, you're still reading for the historical figure being written about, but then you're also reading for the biographer themselves as well, and for the enjoyment of their presentation of the story that you already know. Because at this point, I'm not reading a Queen Victoria biography to read more, or to learn more about her life, because most of her life I'm already quite familiar with.
Right.
So I'm to the point where I'm not really reading about any new events. that are surprising to me that I haven't encountered before. So really now it's more about seeing how a certain biographer presents the story that I'm already familiar with
Right.
in a new light, or a different perspective on something that I'm already quite familiar with. So I would say it's more about the charm of the biographer.
Yeah, it can also highlight their writing ability. Not all biographers are the same
Absolutely.
when it comes to writing ability. But I
It's very
wonder,
true.
so do you think the more you do this, I mean, in 2023, you've read what, two biographies of Queen Victoria? Maybe three?
I believe it's three, and then I'm reading my fourth. And last year I read, I think, five or six.
Do you think it, I mean, it seems inevitable that it would happen then, that in like 2024, 2025, some publisher greenlights a biography of Queen Victoria that is slapped together. It's I've been down this road. We've all been down this road before. We are not amused. All that sort of stuff, and it's lazy and flat. You'll have a lot less patience with such a book, I would imagine.
I think I would. I think I would have less patience. I would still read it.
Yeah, you end up still reading it, no matter who it is.
Just because I'm curious. I'm inherently curious about the subject matter. I'm not going to pass up a book about one of my ladies. I can't do it.
There is, I think, a biographical study of Catherine the Great coming out in 2024. I'll have to get it for you.
Oh, really?
It's not a full dress biography. The last one of those, I think, was Massey's book.
I believe it was, which is excellent.
It is. It's fantastic. I just could not believe when that book appeared. This guy was as old as dirt and had already written two great books. At least he'd written a whole lifetime of books, but he's written two that were really great. If you've written his biography of Peter the Great, you're done. You can hang out over that.
Yeah, hang up the hat. You're good.
Here he gets all the way to the end of his career and turns in a gigantic biography of Catherine the Great that's not only long but terrific.
Was that his final work, or his final published work?
I'm always bad at this. I don't remember. It's certainly his final major work.
That's what I was thinking. Because I mean,
and it's not only is it big and beautifully written, like energetically written, like all of his stuff is, but it also had, I thought, a really good spine to it. The spine was designed to remind everybody that this was a working empress.
right?
You know all the jokes, all the silly stories about horses and whatnot, and Prince Potemkin, but this was a working person. That was important to remember.
Right.
It amazes me. I mean, there was a biography of Maria Theresa, Maria Theresa, just a couple of years ago that finally got translated into English, and it also had the same goal of reminding you that this is a working person who had to be savvy about what she was doing.
Interesting.
But it did not live on the page, at least in English. It didn't live on the page for me. And this guy was half Massey's age when he wrote it.
It really is incredible. I like the way you phrase it, of sort of reading energetically. And anyone who has read, honestly, any of Massey's works, but anyone who's read his Catherine the Great biography or his Peter the Great biography will have to agree with that. It reads, it reads almost like a novel. The narrative is so lively and it's entertaining. You just want to read it.
Who I'm talking to. Who I'm talking to. She's just sort of sitting here staring at me. I'm talking to. Oh, goodness. And you saw the enormous yawn because, believe it or not, 11:30 is still early for her. She
really
doesn't like to get up in the morning at all.
Oh, poor thing.
But she absolutely refuses when it's cold, and it hasn't been cold, so she will grudgingly do it. If it ever gets cold in Boston, then she'll still be in bed at 11.
If winter ever comes again,
I don't think
it's bizarre.
My own prediction is that it will not. My own prediction is that it will not. That the temperatures will go into the upper 30s at night on some of the colder days. They'll always get up into the mid 50s or low 60s during the day, and that'll be just that. That is winter. That will be what winter is.
I mean, that doesn't sound bad. It sounds nice.
Well, yeah, it doesn't sound bad.
Odd for that area.
The coin you're paying for that is fire season in California. then all of a sudden you think, well, okay.
Right. Then it's not worth it anymore.
So
quickly not worth it.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about whether or not you are gradually going to become a biography snob. But of course, you're not, because
I
it's like
hope
you
not.
say. I mean, I feel the same way about Samuel Adams or anybody else. Once you're attracted to a figure in history, if a new biography comes out in that year and it seems really dumb, you're going to read it anyway.
Right.
Because it feels
Right.
at that point, it feels like it's about an old friend.
Exactly. That's sort of the curiosity I have now at this point. Anytime I see anything about Queen Victoria or Catherine the Great or any other figures that I read a lot about, um, yeah, it's sort of, oh, I want to see this person's interpretation of this figure of this person I know really well. Oh, they're writing about a friend. Let's see how they handle it.
So, would you advocate this approach to someone who's maybe leery of reading nonfiction?
Absolutely.
Latch
Yeah,
onto a book?
I would say do a little bit of research, a little preliminary research, find a figure or a couple figures that interest you, and then just stick with them and just read about them. Not it doesn't even have to be direct biographies. I read a lot of indirect material about Queen Victoria, whether it's a biography of a prime minister that was under her reign, or if it's a biography of a contemporary, even if it's from a different country, but who had close interactions with that person. So that gives you a sort of a good perspective. You don't have to just read dedicated biographies of the individual, although I do that a lot as well.
And that
Find
was an outgrowth, right? That was a natural outgrowth of what
yes,
you were doing. Suddenly,
right,
you found yourself interested in reading about her ministers or her
right.
office or whatever. I think that inevitably happens. I think. I
I
think that,
I think it does. If you're reading a biography, especially like of Queen Victoria, and you read about her later years, and you read about her relationship with Benjamin Disraeli, naturally you're going to want to go and then read a biography about him, and that biography will cover a lot about Queen Victoria, just naturally because his life revolved around working with her. And so you'll just pick up these little bits of, oh, I want to read about this person now because obviously they were a key individual. And then I think also by reading about key individuals in your figure's life, you get to see a different side of them as well.
absolutely.
Just because of seeing, oh, this was a close companion of this person, so obviously they're going to shine some light on the individual I'm reading about. If you read about Disraeli, you're going to have new perspectives about Queen Victoria because they worked very closely together. Or if you read about Palmerston, you're going to find out more about Queen Victoria or Melbourne. These individuals who shaped her life as she was becoming a queen, going sort of an uncharted territory for her. It'll shine new light.
And maybe you'll even get to eventually to my guy, to Bertie, King
Yes,
Edward.
yes, absolutely. I read
I'm one
last year. I
era away from you when it comes to this fascination. I think Queen Victoria is fascinating, but
but
King Edward,
Birdie,
oh man.
I've read one biography of him by Jane Ridley last year. I need to read more, but I've only ever read one.
Was Jane Ridley's the one that was no? There was one dumb Edward biography that was.
This one was not dumb.
What was the name of it? Edward the Caresser. That
Um,
wasn't Ridley's book, was it?
no, I don't believe that was her book.
No,
I'm trying
hers
to see.
was like Edward the Heir or something like that.
I don't know
Heir
if I
Apparent.
have
Oh, the Heir Apparent was her book.
the heir apparent. That's what it is. Yeah, the heir apparent. It was good. I was trying to find it on my shelf. I enjoyed that one. That's all I've ever read about him, though. I need to read more. And that's another thing that you bring up, reading about her children. It's a great thing to do.
Her endless children. I
And
don't
her
know
9 children who all lived
who all
past
live.
infancy. Remarkable.
This,
And reading a lot about Prince Albert and her relationship with Albert because it's fascinating.
I always think it's really interesting the ways that let's say, an English monarch reflects their period and the ways they don't. I know you'd have to sort
Yes.
of be into the monarchy to care about that. Edward seems like just the epitome of the Edwardian age, whereas oddly enough, Victoria isn't really the epitome of the Victoria. The Victorians were
No.
inventing and trying all sorts of new things
Right.
all the time. It's kind of
Well,
fascinating.
and it's interesting too because sort of like the Victorian era was not referred to as such while it was taking place. They didn't the Victorians didn't call themselves Victorians because of sort of what you're saying. Queen Victoria didn't embody the essence of the age. It was Albert's doing. sort of the cultivating of the what we now refer to as the Victorian culture really didn't have much to do with Victoria at all.
So this would be another instance of uh, another bit of proof for the fact that we wouldn't know that we're living in the Steve era. That would be
Precisely.
big. It would,
That
your
won't be known until later.
right, your children will know.
My children will come to me and say, "You lived during the Steve era? Tell me more." The epitome of culture. We just didn't realize it yet.
One of the handful of people who've actually
Once your biographies start coming out, that's when people will know.
there's you were so my equivalent of all of Victoria's prime ministers are the people who've been to Hyde Cottage and been screamed at by Frida.
Yes. Yes.
They're
Precisely.
the ones who were the closest to the throne.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
Like there are some people who might say that reading multiple biographies of the same person when there's so many other books to read is incredibly self-indulgent.
It's true.
And when it comes to reading self-indulgence, we have another subject to talk about, don't we? Don't we?
I believe we do. I believe we do.
Right, well, we can start off on a friendly note. We both have much guilt on this subject. We'll just have to confess. It's Sunday after all. But
yes,
you
exactly.
held up just now your Kindle Oasis.
Yes.
A bombshell that you dropped on me.
It's back.
It's back. But you originally, those of you who have not followed Micah's e-book drama or my own, you originally liked using your Oasis until you started realizing you had to charge it all the time.
Yes.
So is this a different Oasis?
This is the same Oasis. The battery life is still not optimum on it. It still drains rather quickly. But I realized sort of that doesn't have to be an issue. My reading chair is right next to an outlet. I can keep it plugged in while I'm using it, and the reading experience is fantastic. So I would never travel with this. I would never leave the house with this. I need to stay within 5 feet of an outlet at all times when I'm using it.
So your battery charge won't get you through a reading session, even
unless it's a very short session. It won't get me through hours.
Are there some things as short reading sessions?
Not for me. Not for me. So it will drain within about 2 hours or so.
Oh my!
I will watch it go from 100% and progressively tick down until the little battery image comes up on the screen and says you need to charge. But it didn't used to do that when I first got it. Which I can't remember when I got it, a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. It held its charge for the allotted time that Amazon bragged about, 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. And then it just sort of steadily lost its ability to retain a charge. Unlike the Paperwhite, which will hold a charge. I will read on this for 3 or 4 hours a day, consistently for weeks before I need to charge it. You
just don't need to think
phenomenal.
About it. You really
don't. I really don't. It takes me by surprise when I realize that I have to charge it. That's how rarely I have to do it.
And then there's another temptation on Micah's horizon.
There is.
This is the basic entry-level Kindle that they make in black and blue.
Yes.
And it has the raised bezels, USB-C charging.
USB-C. I like to see that. I love the aluminum body on the Oasis.
Oh, me too.
But I don't like that it's still micro USB because I don't have any micro USB charging because everything else is USB-C.
After a while of you regularly update your tech. There's no way around that. You just regularly
have to at some point.
After a while, you look around and realize that everything you have is the same power source. It's all USB-C. Because everything has migrated in that direction. That was natural anyway. That was the natural thing that was going to happen anyway.
Right.
Except for all of these old devices that don't charge that way. So you have to have that on board.
Exactly.
But getting this when you have the other two is also indulgent. Is it not?
Most certainly is. I have to code it by saying I would do it for the people, to make a review video, a comparison. I'm helping others, Steve.
Is that how you would do it?
Bigger than me. I'm doing it for my followers.
Okay. All right. Well, that's obviously diseased, but also there's a kernel of truth to it, because any of you who have been to Micah's channel will know your tech review videos do really well. In the sense, in the YouTube sense of doing well, they get lots and lots of views. People use them.
They're my highest viewed videos. I don't know how I feel about that. It's true though.
Are you saying they are higher viewed than? Oh, I've never been on your channel, have I? You're on my channel.
Yes.
Oh.
I don't know what would happen if I posted this video on my channel.
I don't either. I don't think you want to know.
It might break some things. I don't know.
Oh my. Oh my.
I don't know if I have the bandwidth for that.
We were discussing this, that yes, you're doing it for the people, but is there a way in which, and maybe you other ebook readers, is there a way in which the gadgets get in the way of reading?
Absolutely.
You think so?
I do think so. I think probably for those of us who are indulgent when it comes to reading tech. I do know plenty of people who they bought a Kindle Touch in 2012, or they bought a Nook Glow Light in 2012, and they have used it every day since.
They still have it. They still use it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, and they bought the one and they use it forever and they love it and they never think about it again.
It's as simple as it gets.
And I think there's people like us who are tempted by the shiny newness of the new way to read.
I justify it myself by something that I really noticed between the Kindle Paperwhite and even the Kindle Basic, which is the responsivity.
Yes.
When I'm using the Kindle Basic, I tap and it changes. There isn't that hanging moment where did I hit it or didn't I? Is it going to do again? That sort of thing. There isn't anything like that. And of course, completely missing on this because you've got the buttons. So you know when you've hit it and when you haven't hit it. You know that when it's listening and when it's not.
Absolutely. I'd say the Oasis having the physical buttons and then the Kindle Basic having the raised bezels. Those are my two favorite methods for reading. I'm not actually a very big fan of the flush screen on the new Paperwhite. And that is just because of accidental page turning.
Yeah.
Like when you have that raised bezel, you can, if I hold up, and also these bezels on the new Paperwhite are pretty slim. They're pretty slim here. So if I have my thumb on the bezel, I'm resting on the screen as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can easily accidentally turn a page, and obviously that's not the worst thing ever. It's a dumb little thing. But if that keeps happening over and over and over during a reading session, it does become a nuisance.
Yes, it does. Yep.
Just the same thing with the power button being right where you're
at the bottom.
Exactly. You'll just turn the screen off and
if
it just goes off.
A print and paper book, it would be the equivalent of every third page repeat the page from 3 pages ago. If you had a print book like that, you would throw it out.
If you kept opening the book and it would flip 3 pages back every time.
Or stop completely.
Or just close and fall to the floor. Every time you tried to open it, it shut itself.
I had a reading tech-pocalypse myself the other day. I didn't even realize what was happening when it was happening. I was using the Kindle Oasis. I read a long time on it. Then I put it on a shelf, by the bed, because occasionally I have to, what's the word again? Sleep?
No. You, Steve?
It's true, I do. Occasionally I need to sleep, so I put it on the shelf.
You're becoming less and less of a god and more mortal.
It was my time of the week, so I had to sleep. I put it face up. I turned it off. I put it face up on the shelf and curled up with the baby bean. And about an hour later, the light turned on the screen. It started illuminating all the shelves. And I thought, it must be undergoing some sort of update, because I don't put it in airplane mode. So it can take updates that are pushed through. I thought, some sort of update. It's no big deal. It'll dim in a minute or two. And it did dim in a minute or two. But when I next turned it on, all of my highlights and notes were gone.
Oh, weird.
The books were all still there, even the side-loaded books, but all the excess stuff was gone. can't help but draw a connection between those two things.
No, right.
That doesn't happen with a print book at all.
Most certainly not.
But
Most certainly not.
I don't know. I'm not going to let it throw me. I'm not going to let it throw me. I can put those highlights back. And it's
Did,
no
did the highlights and notes stay on your other devices on those books that they disappeared from the Oasis? Because that's confusing. Because I feel like that would be tied into Amazon's ecosystem. So how could it just go off of one device? That's interesting.
Well, it was only this device that had that push through update. That's why I'm linking the two. I don't know if they're linked, but that's why I'm linking the two.
The update has some bug issue with highlights or something.
But before we run out of time,
yes,
I mentioned self-indulgence. First, that you would read multiple biographies of the same person, then that both of us would accumulate multiple reading devices when, as you say correctly, there are plenty of people out there who got a Nook in 2012 and have never changed it. They read delightedly on it ever since.
Right.
It's a testament to how good these things are.
Absolutely.
I think your Oasis has a bum battery.
I think it does.
Most of the time, they last.
I was reading on Reddit, and I think that's exactly. I think there was a batch that was produced with a bad battery, because about half the people will say my battery crapped out, and the other half says it's still going strong.
Yeah. But in addition to all of that, there's one other indulgence that we have made a Romeo and Juliet style suicide pact to do together in the new year that is even more of an indulgence than having multiple years.
Yes.
We confess together, Micah. They have such a high opinion of us both. Oh wait, they don't have a high opinion of me, do they? No,
and mine is quickly diminishing. Don't be
quickly diminishing. Yes, through association.
I've been on your channel long enough. My reputation is already it's gone.
I warn young men about this all the time.
I've been tread under in the mud.
We might as well confess, Micah. The tech channels are going to want to know
the possible tech pact that Steve and I may be signing in the new year.
iPad Mini 6.
Yes.
Talking about
the most often reoccurring subject on our Voxer chats
is the iPad Mini 6.
Is the iPad Mini 6. Yeah. Us justifying to each other the reasons why we think we should just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And then like two drug addicts who are in recovery, we both then talk each other down. Oh, come on, man. Yes. It's not that bad.
Yes, exactly.
Then weeks pass.
He messages me at 3 a.m. I'm about to do it. I'm going to buy it. No, don't. You can be strong.
It is a mighty tempting device.
It is. Particularly
all the tech that we hear about, all kinds. What's the one piece of tech in the last 10 years that has no detractors?
That every tech bro agrees is good.
All of them agree.
How is this possible?
They agree only on two things. Women aren't sentient, and the iPad Mini 6.
The iPad Mini 6 is the best.
That's all. That's the two things they agree on.
It's their creed. The two things they all agree on.
It has amazing technology behind it. It's got an amazing build. It's the square bezel so that you could actually,
sturdy.
Calm enough, you could stand it upright.
It looks sturdy. It looks like you could throw it at a wall and break your wall.
And also, the tech bro term is future-proof, for those of you who don't know your tech channels. And that is a device built well enough with a big enough update window so that your purchase price, which for the iPad Mini 6 is eye-watering.
Yes.
Your purchase price is sort of amortized over the next 5 years because
sort of this idea of you buy it now and you will not have to replace it ever.
Or at least for a long time.
Or at least for 10 years or 12 years or.
Oh, I don't think even Apple's promising 10 years.
You don't think so?
No, but 5 years. If for instance, Amazon had thought to do it, when they first came out with the Kindle Paperwhite, they could have said, well, in terms of future-proofing, it's a no-brainer of a purchase because it's never going to break. You're never going to need to replace it. It isn't vulnerable to software updates or anything like that. You're going to have 1,000 books on it. Read it at any time. It barely needs a charge. It is a concern with iPads. They do reach a point, right? Well, I don't know if you would know because you're wiki, you know. My original iPads
well, I mean, you've gone through from the first generation iPad.
My original iPads do not connect to the internet anymore. You can't do anything with them except jailbreak. You could if you you want to do that, you could. In which case, you would go through a huge amount of bother to have a 15-year-old tablet that you could
Right.
do.
What would be the point of that?
I don't know.
Congratulations, you spent an entire day. Now you have this old tablet that's super slow.
I still get a lot of use out of my iPad second generation, but it's really only once you get up to like the fourth generation that it's still actively an iPad. And
Interesting.
2 generations, that won't be true. The fourth generation won't be taking updates. It won't be
Right.
able to run any of the newest versions of any basic apps. Maybe you
Right.
can still read on it, but that's the risk you run with Apple tech, is that it's going to be outdated. And we don't run much of that risk with the iPad Mini 6.
There is still a slight risk, but it's much, much thinner.
The real argument against it is all of the e-readers that we've held up. I mean, honestly speaking, what's the main thing you would use an iPad Mini 6 for? Reading. And you have
Reading in the channel, doing work for the channel.
oh, indeed. You have a shelf full of books, and so do I, and you have a ton of e-readers.
Yes.
And yet we've made a pinky promise for 2024.
I don't know what we're doing. So many ideas held in opposition.
Well, I think on the surface, I think our Romeo and Juliet suicide pact was it'll feel a little bit better if we do it together. It won't
Exactly.
feel like quite the sinful self-indulgence. And then
It's not indulgent if someone else is doing it.
everybody's doing it.
It's just a trend then.
And underneath the surface, I think we both have the same subterranean motive, which is that we can blame each other.
Exactly. The entire time I talk about it on my channel, I would just be blaming the poor influence of Steve Donahue on my tech life.
It's the opposite of an accountability partner.
Yes, exactly. Someone to blame.
Well, we're gonna get cut off in mid-sentence here.
Yes, we can't
A
do that.
lot of weird ground. Everything from Catherine the Great to an iPad Mini 6. We'll do it again next weekend.
Yes,
Yeah,
let's.
maybe if you're free.
I will be.
I'll have a whole bunch more scandals to reveal.
Perfect.
Squeaky
I
clean.
look forward to it.
All right, everybody. We'll say
Bye,
goodbye
Book.
for now.